Now that we figured out your protein, carbs and fats are the other two macronutrients filling up your caloric intake. In nutritional science terms, carbohydrates are not considered to be essential. According to the field of dietetics, the essentialness comes down to whether or not your body can synthesize it on its own. And fortunately, your body can maintain blood glucose levels even if you don't consume dietary carbohydrates. But the real question is, will carbohydrates help you maintain performance and subsequently muscle mass while dieting? Well, it's important to understand that lifting weights is the number one thing you can do to prevent lean body mass losses during a diet. Number 2 in importance is your rate of weight loss. And number 3 in importance would be your macronutrient intake that we're figuring out right now. And that said, while dietary carbs are important for performance, they aren't technically essential for life and function, which is why we set dietary fat first. While dieting as a strength or physique athlete, it makes sense in most cases to lower fat a little more than you typically would in the off-season. This is because lower fat allows for higher carbohydrate, which is beneficial because if carbs are too low during energy restriction, it can sabotage your training, which in turn sabotages your ability to retain lean body mass. So we recommend that 15 to 25% of your calories come from fat while dieting, and the rest can come from carbohydrate. 15% is lower than ideal in most cases, but it's why diets don't last forever. And sure, there are some people who do fine on lower carb, higher fat diets while cutting. And for those individuals, we found that an intake as high as 40% of their calories from fat is appropriate, as long as the increase in fat calories doesn't result in a decrease in carbohydrate calories so far that they go below the minimum range we're about to discuss in a minute. In our coaching practice, we found that most physique athletes feel and perform better with much more carb calories than fat calories. But it's really a matter of personal preference and experience if you'd like to play with this ratio. And if you do, we'd recommend doing this testing period outside of a contest prep scenario while the timeline is open and the stakes are low. But in general, 15 to 25% is ideal for most dieting athletes in order to keep carbs as high as possible for training and muscle retention. Of course, we all know that dieting requires caloric restriction, and caloric restriction requires macronutrient restriction. But for those with a very low energy expenditure, it's possible that by using the guidelines in this course, you may end up inappropriately low in your intake of fat or carbohydrate. To prevent this, use the minimum intakes of 0.25 grams per pound of dietary fat and 0.5 grams per pound of dietary carbohydrate. That's approximately 0.5 grams per kilogram of fat or about 1 gram per kilogram of carbohydrate. In some cases, you may find that to maintain these minimums, you'll have to accept a slower rate of weight loss than you might like. If you're targeting a loss rate of 1% of your body weight per week, but to achieve it, you would have to take your fat or carbohydrate below these thresholds, the best course of action is to simply accept a rate of weight loss closer to 0.5% of your body weight per week. In some rare cases, you might even have to go slower than that, like towards the tail end of a contest prep. In general, it's best to accept slower rates of loss than to drop below these minimums to give yourself the best shot at maximal muscle retention.